Hello students, this is Dr. Newmark and here is your week 13 highlights video. This video will be a little longer than the other videos, I suspect, because I'm going through 4 chapters from the Rubin and Chisnell book, and I've made an effort to connect the chapters directly to what you're doing in your group project. So, chapter 6 is entitled Setting Up a Testing Environment. I'm also going to share this presentation in the area beneath the video in YouTube, so you can go back to these slides and read through them because they're pretty text heavy, which isn't the best approach in a PowerPoint presentation, but I wanted to be sure you had all of the content. So one of the concepts Rubin and Chisnell start their chapter with concerns formative and summative usability testing. Do you know the difference? Now, since you don't work for Adobe and you weren't involved in the process as they were building Creative Cloud Express, you are doing summative testing. You are not in the developmental stages or a prototype stage of this project. So because you're doing summative testing, and this would pertain to other kinds of testing too, you need to figure these things out. Where you will test, is it going to be remote testing or sit by in-person testing? Who will you test? And why you are testing. Of all the testing setups described in the chapter, what best describes what you and your team will use and why? What logistical knowledge or other factors influence this? So everything you are planning concerning what setup you will use needs to be described in your test plan. Now that is a document that you do not have to turn in the intervening weeks between the assignment's launch and the completed draft of the whole project. You have to turn it in at the end when you submit everything to me, but I do not see the draft of it. I did circulate to all students models of what test plans look like, one from usability.gov and one from a student from another class at another university. Please be sure that you're familiar with the scope of a test plan. But remember, according to the scope of the book, you are not working in a large corporation. You are not working in industry. You are a student in a university class. So typically in an industry setting, there would be staff and resources dedicated to user research and testing, and we don't have that. So of course, I'm not asking you to do as thorough a job or as in-depth a job as Chisnell and Rubin describe in their text, but I want you to adapt and learn from what they are informing you about to create your own structured plan and ultimately test and findings for this class. Okay, so chapter 7 talks about finding and selecting participants. So the selection and acquisition, say Rubin and Chisnell, of participants whose background and abilities are representative of your product's intended user is a crucial element of the testing process. So can you visualize and describe the participant tester you want in the test relative to what Creative Cloud Express purports to do and who it purports to serve? You should do some research on who they're marketing this project to. In fact, on their landing page, they have some little images of who they imagine might be a good target user. Think about that. So yes, ideally, corporations have a good sense of who is using their product. Adobe certainly does. The size of their company would definitely allow them to have that data. Do you think they have a sense of who is using their competitor's product, though? And what are those competitors? We know that Canva is a competitor. Are there any others that you think their target audience might be using instead of their product? So what is the difference between a demographic profile of a potential likely user and a narrative persona? There's some really detailed information about this in chapter 7, and I really think it would behoove you to understand that. Would you typically have just one persona? Also, how many people should you test? See page 126 for more information on this. I'm giving you the page number explicitly so you don't have any missteps here. So chapter 7 also gives an overview of some effective ways and categories for finding qualified testers. How do you avoid only testing, as the book says, the best people? And what does that mean in the context of users of a product or a piece of software or a technology? They're not talking about any sort of other kinds of qualities. Best is solely related to their aptitudes with that technology or that tool or that utility. So what does it mean though if you only test the quote-unquote best people in this respect? So chapter 8 is about preparing your test materials. So pages 153 and 4 feature a list of the materials, the written materials, that one needs to have prepared for the days one runs a test. Do you think all of these will pertain during your test? So be sure that you're familiar with that list and think about how you're going to use it whole cloth or how you're going to adapt it for what you're doing in the scope of our assignment for this class. So when it comes to the data you will collect, how are you going to collect it and how are you going to analyze it? You need to think about this for your ultimate report in which you compile everything and you share your findings. So this chapter reviews all kinds of data one might collect. Remember, a key part of deciding what kind of data to collect is reviewing your original research questions. Do your questions align with the kinds of data you're going to collect? So what is the benefit of using a pre-test questionnaire? And how does that tool relate to a post-test questionnaire? So now let's move on to the end of chapter 8. So page 182 gives you a considerable amount of information about creating task scenarios, which build upon the simpler tasks in your test plan. And the groups that I've met with, we've talked about the difference between a task and a task scenario. And I've shared some websites that talk about this too, but your book talks about it. So use this chapter to guide you in understanding what your post-test questionnaire is supposed to do. How might you adapt a version of the system usability scale? They abbreviate that as the SUS to your own questionnaire. Now, chapter 9, conducting the test. How do you prepare yourself to best understand what you are seeing during the test and to not influence what is happening during the test? Are you going to use the think aloud technique or protocol? And can you probe or interact with your participants without influencing your findings? So they speak directly to this issue and what is going too far and what is sort of acceptable involvement with the tester during the test itself. One important message in this chapter is that as a moderator, you must not rescue the test taker. Why not? You should be able to answer that question. So you must remember, as the book says, never ever blame the participant. And why shouldn't you blame the participant? It's important to think about. So finally, otherwise, this chapter gives you a very useful step-by-step, day-by-day approach to getting ready for your test and running it. So follow these steps modified as needed for the scope of our class. As I said earlier in this video, you're not working for a large corporation with a bunch of other people involved in usability testing, user research. We're in a English 319 class, so you need to scale some of these things down to fit the parameters of our class, the time that was allotted for this assignment, and what is in the assignment prompt. So there you have it. That's the end of your week 13 highlights video, and I hope this has been helpful. See you next week.